I want to bring into the conversation right now criminal defense attorney Michael Gottlieb. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And it's very, very interesting to see some of these very prestigious universities kind of have to deal with this. In terms of the locations and why these protesters are out there, kind of what specifically about these college campuses that lends themselves to have these protesters on them?
Well, every college campus is different and unique, and I think the issue is that any college campus that is government funded, receives any kind of government aid, has to allow protests and has to allow free speech under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, even hate speech. So the issue is that speech subject to time, place, and manner restrictions? And that's where we've landed on hate speech with the Constitution. So for instance, there are universities that can say this is not the time for you to be doing this because it's exam time. And so therefore we can disband the protest. But we're not seeing these universities take that appropriate action at this point in time. They could require that there is a permit. And they're not requiring that. So, a lot of these universities, I feel, have been infiltrated by Hamas and are allowing this anti-American protests to take place because a lot of these protests, people are chanting death to America. And I think that that's problematic.
Yeah, and you mentioned just some of these universities, some private, some public. We saw the University of Texas yesterday. Columbia University continues to be kind of the center of the point of that. In terms of the legal scope of what that means, is there a difference between a public versus a private institution and how they kind of go about getting these permits or different things on a legal basis?
I think arguably not, that there is no difference, because arguably you could say that a private institution receives government funds. So if they receive grants, I think one could say that that they don't have the ability to stifle the speech. If it's truly and exclusively a private institution, then they could say, look, we can do what we want because we don't have any public funds. So I do think that there is a difference, and I think that unfortunately an argument can be made.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. So very interesting there as well. I do want to ask you just about some of the arrests that are being made, because 50 students were arrested on Yale, others around the country. We saw a Fox 7 photographer being arrested in terms of that. What goes into that, and maybe what happens in terms of the legal process when someone in these protests is arrested?
So I think most likely somebody's being arrested for a breach of the peace, and I think what's going to happen is the local prosecuting authority has to decide, do they want to move forward and prosecute these individuals? So that typically takes about 3 weeks. If they do prosecute, the individuals will be set for an arraignment, and arraignments where you're apprised of the criminal charges against you, and it's your first opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty to those charges. And then depending on the severity of the charges, whether it's a trespass, whether it's a breach of the peace, or something more egregious, the case will take a life of its own.
Does it factor in anything? Because some of these students, we also mentioned outside agitators, which police are concerned about, administrations are concerned about. Does the fact that these are students, does that factor into anything about this plea, about them being arrested?
If they get arrested, a lot of schools have moral codes, moral contracts that you sign when you become a student. So they could be subject to being removed from the university or placed on probation. So it's definitely a factor.
All right, that makes sense. I do want to put up also this tweet because these are impacting classes. Some schools have gone online, but also commencements. I do want to put up this tweet from Bill Malugin talking about USC announces it's canceling its main stage commencement ceremony. The comments have shut off. It's brutal for the class of 2024. In terms of what the administration can do, in terms of what different administrations are doing to protect students there in that regard, is there anything else they can do, these universities can do, while they see all these protesters, these tents pop up on their campus?
So I think that's really interesting, and that's where the Constitution protects the university over the protesters. As I said before, time, place, and manner. So, a graduation is arguably not the place for protesters to come and interfere with. Examinations, not the time to place, not time or place for the protesters to come. The manner, interrupting something. So I think universities can take action and remove them from campus forcibly if they are interfering with university functions.
All right, that is very interesting. Of course, the First Amendment there coming into play and where they draw the line, a big factor of all these protests. All right, Michael, thank you again for your time, your insight, your perspective here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you so much.